An entitled teacher humiliated a black girl during graduation. She didn't know her father was the school founder. Graduation music echoed through the packed auditorium. Hundreds of parents stood holding cameras. The principal smiled proudly. And now, our valedictorian, Maya Johnson. Applause filled the room. But before Maya could stand, Mrs. Evelyn Carter grabbed the microphone. "I'm sorry. There has been a change." The applause stopped. Mrs. Carter looked directly at Maya. "You won't be giving the speech today." The entire auditorium froze. Maya slowly stood. "In peace." "May I ask why?" Mrs. Carter smiled coldly. "Because this ceremony deserves someone who actually represents our school's legacy." Several students exchanged confused looks. Mrs. Carter pointed toward another girl sitting in the front row. "Emma Collins will speak instead." Maya quietly looked down at the speech she'd spent 6 months writing. Without arguing, she folded it, sat back down. Then something unexpected happened. The auditorium doors quietly opened. A man wearing faded work boots, simple clothes, and carrying an old leather folder, walked inside. Mrs. Carter barely looked at him. She motioned toward the back row. "Parents, sit back there." The man smiled politely. "Of course." As he quietly walked toward the last seat, the chairman of the school board suddenly stood up. His eyes widened. Then he hurried across the entire auditorium, straight toward the man, and loudly said, "Mr. Johnson, we've all been waiting for you." The entire graduation ceremony fell silent. The morning sun poured through the towering glass windows of Riverside Academy. Blue and silver graduation banners fluttered gently across the auditorium. Rows of polished chairs stretched from one end of the stage to the other. Parents filled the seats with flowers, balloons, and cameras. Laughter echoed through the hall. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of the year. For one student, it would become the most humiliating. Backstage, Maya Johnson adjusted the collar of her blue graduation gown. 18 years old, a brilliant black student, deep brown skin, natural curls gathered neatly into a soft puff beneath her graduation cap. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a folded speech. Nearly 6 months of writing, rewriting, practicing. Every word had been carefully chosen. Her best friend Sophia Ramirez smiled. "You've read that speech so many times. I think I know it by heart." Maya laughed softly. "I'm still nervous." "You?" Sophia nudged her shoulder. "You've been first in the class since freshman year. You've won every academic competition. The entire school loves you." Maya smiled. "I just don't want to disappoint my dad." Across town, Daniel Johnson parked his old pickup truck beside a small flower shop. The truck had nearly 200,000 miles on it. The paint had faded years ago. Most people would have traded it in. Daniel never did. Inside the shop, he carefully chose a bouquet of white lilies. They're her favorite. The florist smiled. "Graduation?" Daniel nodded proudly. "My little girl." The florist wrapped the flowers carefully. "You must be excited." Daniel smiled. "I've waited 18 years for today." Back at Riverside Academy, students lined up outside the auditorium. Teachers checked attendance. Families searched for seats. Everything seemed perfect. Until Mrs. Evelyn Carter walked in. The senior teacher's heels clicked sharply against the wooden floor. 49 years old, perfectly pressed navy blazer, silver brooch, hair flawlessly styled. Everything about her demanded authority. She carried a clipboard. Without smiling once, she stopped in front of Maya. "Miss Johnson?" Maya looked up. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." Mrs. Carter glanced at the front row seating chart, then at Maya. "There has been a change." Maya frowned slightly. "A change?" "Yes." Mrs. Carter removed Maya's name from the very first seat, then quietly wrote another name, Emma Collins. Maya blinked. "I don't understand." Mrs. Carter answered coldly. "Emma will sit in the front row. My name has always been there." "Not anymore." Sophia stepped forward. "But Maya is valedictorian." Mrs. Carter didn't even look at her. "I wasn't speaking to you." Several nearby students noticed the conversation. Whispers immediately spread. "Why are they moving Maya? That doesn't make sense. She earned that seat." Mrs. Carter turned toward the crowd. "Everyone back to your places." The hallway instantly fell silent. Maya spoke carefully. "May I ask why I'm being moved?" Mrs. Carter smiled politely. The kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "The front row is reserved for students who best represent Riverside Academy." Maya stared at her. "I thought my grades did." Mrs. Carter leaned closer. "Grades aren't everything." Without another word, she pointed toward the fourth row. "That's your seat." Emma Collins approached awkwardly. Do I really take her place?" Mrs. Carter smiled warmly. "You've worked very hard." Emma looked uncomfortable. She quietly whispered to Maya, "I'm sorry." Maya simply smiled. "It's okay." She picked up her graduation cap and quietly walked toward the fourth row, not because she agreed, because she refused to create a scene. From the auditorium entrance, Principal Harris had witnessed part of the exchange. He walked over. "Evelyn, why was Maya moved?" Mrs. Carter answered confidently, "Minor seating adjustment." The principal looked puzzled. "I don't remember approving one. I handled it." The principal glanced toward Maya. She was already sitting quietly, reading over her speech again. He considered asking another question, but the orchestra suddenly began warming up. Parents started entering. The ceremony was minutes away. "I'll deal with it later." Mrs. Carter smiled. "Of course." Outside, Daniel stepped out of his old pickup carrying the bouquet. He looked at the school building. His eyes lingered on the original stone entrance. He smiled quietly. So much has changed. And yet nothing has. A groundskeeper recognized him. "Morning." Daniel smiled. "Morning." The groundskeeper looked at the old truck. "You here for graduation?" "My daughter. You must be proud." Daniel nodded. "More than she'll ever know." Backstage, Maya unfolded her speech one last time. The title read, "The Power of Being Seen." She whispered the opening line to herself. Sophia smiled. "You've got this." Just then, Mrs. Carter returned. Her expression was colder than before. She held out her hand. "I'll need your speech." Maya looked confused. "My speech?" "Yes." "The program has changed." Silence. Maya slowly lowered the papers. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Carter looked directly into her eyes. "You won't be speaking today." The words landed like a punch. Sophia gasped. "Maya's the valedictorian." Mrs. Carter ignored her. She extended her hand again. "The speech." Maya looked down at the pages she'd spent months writing, then back at Mrs. Carter. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "May I at least know why?" Mrs. Carter calmly replied, "Because this graduation deserves someone who represents the school's legacy." She took the speech from Maya's trembling hands, turned around, and walked away. Maya remained standing in complete silence, watching 6 months of dreams disappear. Without anyone explaining why, Maya remained frozen backstage. The folded pages of her graduation speech had disappeared into Mrs. Carter's hands. For a long moment, she couldn't move. She couldn't even think. 6 months, every late night, every rewritten paragraph, every practiced sentence, gone. Sophia grabbed Maya's arm. "This isn't right. We need to tell Principal Harris." Maya slowly shook her head. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. But she can't do this." Maya forced a small smile. Apparently, she already did. On the other side of the curtain, parents filled nearly every seat inside the auditorium. Camera flashes sparkled across the room. Children waved at family members. Teachers adjusted graduation medals. Everything looked perfect. No one knew what had just happened backstage. Principal Harris stepped to the microphone. "Good morning, everyone. Today we celebrate years of hard work, determination, and achievement." Applause echoed throughout the auditorium. Backstage, Maya quietly folded her empty speech folder. She looked toward the stage. She had imagined this moment since middle school, walking onto that stage, looking out at hundreds of proud parents, thanking her father, sharing one final message with her classmates. Now, she wasn't even sure why she was standing backstage. Mrs. Carter returned. "Miss Johnson," Maya looked up. "I need you to help hand out diplomas after the speeches." Sophia stared at her. "She's the valedictorian," Mrs. Carter answered coldly. "And today she'll be helping." Maya asked quietly, "So I'm not graduating with my class?" "You'll graduate, you just won't be the center of attention." Mrs. Carter walked away again. Sophia whispered, "I can't believe her." Maya remained silent. Then she quietly said, "My dad drove 2 hours to hear that speech." Her voice finally cracked. "What am I supposed to tell him?" Outside, Daniel Johnson entered the campus carrying the bouquet of white lilies. The parking lot attendants directed expensive cars toward the VIP entrance. Luxury SUVs, black sedans. Even the mayor had arrived. Daniel looked down at his faded pickup truck, smiled to himself, then continued walking. He never cared what people thought about appearances. As he approached the auditorium entrance, a security volunteer stepped in front of him. "Excuse me, sir. Parents enter through the side doors." Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you." He started walking toward the entrance. Just then, Mrs. Carter noticed him. She looked Daniel up and down. Old work boots, simple button-down shirt, no expensive watch, no designer suit. She assumed everything she needed to know. "Sir," Daniel stopped. "Yes, the reserved section is for VIP families. I'm here for my daughter's graduation." Mrs. Carter smiled politely. "I'm sure you are." But those seats are already assigned. Daniel nodded. No problem. I'll sit wherever there's room. Mrs. Carter pointed toward the last row. Back there. Daniel thanked her, then quietly walked to the back without another word. Several parents watched the exchange. One woman whispered, "That was unnecessary." Another quietly nodded. He didn't argue once. Backstage, Emma Collins approached Maya. She looked embarrassed. "I'm really sorry." Maya smiled softly. "You didn't ask for this." Emma lowered her head. "I told Mrs. Carter I didn't want your speech." "What did she say?" "She told me, some families represent the school's future better than others." Maya stared at her. For the first time, she realized this wasn't about grades. It wasn't about speeches. It wasn't even about graduation. Mrs. Carter had already decided who deserved recognition and who didn't. The orchestra began playing Pomp and Circumstance. Graduates lined up. The ceremony officially began. One by one, students walked onto the stage. Parents cheered. Flowers filled the auditorium. Daniel smiled proudly from the last row every time he caught a glimpse of Maya. He had no idea she had already lost the moment she worked hardest for. After several awards, Principal Harris returned to the microphone. "And now, our graduating class speech." The audience applauded. Maya instinctively stood, before she realized it wasn't her name that was announced. "Please welcome, Emma Collins." The applause continued. Maya slowly sat back down. Around her, several classmates exchanged confused looks. One student whispered, "That's supposed to be Maya." Another nodded, "Everyone knows that." Parents began whispering too. Principal Harris glanced toward Mrs. Carter with a puzzled expression. This wasn't the printed program, but before he could ask questions, Emma had already reached the podium. She unfolded the speech, looked at the first page, then froze. She slowly looked toward Maya, then back at the audience. Tears formed in her eyes. Finally, she stepped away from the microphone. I can't do this." The auditorium became silent. Emma looked directly at Principal Harris, then pointed toward Maya. "This isn't my speech. It never was." Every conversation in the auditorium stopped. Mrs. Carter's confident smile instantly disappeared. And from the very last row, Daniel Johnson quietly stood up. Not angry, not shouting, just watching. Very carefully, the entire auditorium fell silent. Emma Collins stood behind the podium, gripping the microphone with trembling hands. Her eyes searched the crowd, then settled on Maya. She slowly shook her head. "I'm sorry. I can't pretend this speech belongs to me." Whispers immediately spread across the auditorium. "What did she say?" "That's Maya's speech." I knew something wasn't right. Principal Harris looked toward Mrs. Carter. His expression had completely changed. "Evelyn, what is she talking about?" Mrs. Carter forced a smile. "Emma's just nervous." Emma spoke again. "No, I'm telling the truth." She held up the folded pages. "Mrs. Carter gave me Maya's speech this morning." The room erupted into quiet murmurs. Several parents began recording with their phones. Principal Harris slowly walked toward the stage. "Mrs. Carter, did you remove Maya as valedictorian?" She hesitated for the first time all morning. "There were administrative changes." "What changes?" "I made a professional decision." Principal Harris frowned. "Without my approval?" Mrs. Carter didn't answer. Backstage, Maya wanted to disappear. This wasn't how she wanted the truth to come out. She hadn't wanted anyone embarrassed. Especially not another student. Emma looked toward her again. "I'm sorry. You earned this." Maya gave her a small nod. "It isn't your fault." From the last row, Daniel quietly watched everything unfold. He looked down at the bouquet of white lilies in his hands, then toward his daughter. He could see the pain she was trying so hard to hide. His fingers tightened around the flowers, not from anger, from heartbreak. He whispered to himself, "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone." Principal Harris addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we've encountered an unexpected situation." Mrs. Carter quickly interrupted. "The ceremony must continue. We'll discuss this later." Principal Harris looked at her sharply. "No, we'll discuss it now." He turned toward Maya. "Miss Johnson, did you know about this?" Maya slowly walked onto the stage. Hundreds of eyes followed her. She took a deep breath. "Mrs. Carter informed me this morning." "And you didn't tell anyone?" Maya looked around the auditorium. "I didn't want graduation to become about me." Silence. Even the students looked emotional. One mother stood from the audience. "My son told us Maya has been #1 in the class for 4 years. Another parent added, "She won every academic award." A third voice called out, "Then why isn't she speaking?" The questions kept coming. Mrs. Carter's confidence was beginning to disappear. Just then, the auditorium doors quietly opened. 5 members of the Riverside Academy Board of Trustees walked inside. Everyone immediately recognized them. The audience began whispering again. The school board, why are they here? They never attend graduation. Leading them was Chairman Robert Ellis, a distinguished man in his 70s. He walked directly toward Principal Harris. Sorry we're late. Principal Harris looked relieved. Chairman Ellis, you arrived at a difficult moment. Ellis glanced around the tense auditorium. So I can see. Then he asked one simple question. Has Mr. Daniel Johnson arrived yet? Principal Harris looked confused. I don't believe so. Mrs. Carter quickly stepped forward. No, sir. We only have Maya Johnson's father here. Chairman Ellis smiled gently. I know. That's exactly who I'm looking for. Mrs. Carter blinked. I'm sorry? Ellis looked toward the back row of the auditorium. His face immediately brightened. There he is. Every head in the auditorium slowly turned. Daniel Johnson quietly stood from the very last seat, still holding the bouquet of white lilies. Still dressed in simple clothes. The chairman of the board walked across the entire auditorium, stopped in front of him, then extended both hands with deep respect. Mr. Johnson, thank you for finally coming home. The entire auditorium froze. Mrs. Carter's face slowly lost all color. She suddenly realized the man she had sent to the back of the room wasn't just another parent. And whatever secret the board knew, it was about to change everything. The auditorium was so quiet that the sound of Chairman Robert Ellis's footsteps echoed across the room. He stopped directly in front of Daniel Johnson, then smiled warmly. It's been far too long. Daniel returned the smile. It has. Chairman Ellis shook his hand with both of his. You look just like your father. Daniel laughed softly. I hear that a lot. Every teacher, every parent, every student watched in complete confusion. Mrs. Carter whispered to Principal Harris. Do they know each other? Principal Harris slowly shook his head. I have no idea. Chairman Ellis turned toward the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce someone very special. Daniel quietly interrupted. Chairman, this isn't about me. Ellis smiled. It stopped being only about you. The moment your daughter was denied the honor she earned. Daniel looked toward Maya. She was still standing on the stage, trying to understand what was happening. Chairman Ellis addressed the audience. Many of you know Riverside Academy has existed for over 50 years. Parents nodded. But very few people know how it began. He looked toward Daniel. 52 years ago, a young teacher named Samuel Johnson sold almost everything he owned to build a school where every child would be judged by their character and hard work, never by their background. The giant screen behind the stage suddenly lit up. An old black and white photograph appeared. A smiling black man standing beside the original school building. The audience became completely silent. Ellis continued. That man was Samuel Johnson. He was this school's founder. Gasps echoed throughout the auditorium. Mrs. Carter slowly looked from the photograph to Daniel. Her breathing became heavier. Chairman Ellis smiled proudly. Samuel's son continued protecting the school through the Johnson Family Foundation. He paused. And when he retired, the responsibility passed to his grandson. He gently placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Mr. Daniel Johnson. The auditorium erupted into stunned whispers. No way. That's Maya's father? The founder's family? I thought he was just... No one finished the sentence. Because they suddenly remembered the old pickup truck, the simple clothes, the back row seat. Mrs. Carter's face turned pale. She stepped backward. This can't be right. Chairman Ellis calmly looked at her. It is. He accepted an old leather folder from Daniel. Inside were carefully preserved documents. The original land deed, the school's first charter, historic photographs, letters written by Samuel Johnson decades earlier. Ellis held up the first document. This school still operates under the Johnson Family Educational Trust. He looked around the auditorium. And Mr. Daniel Johnson serves as its current chairman. Complete silence. Principal Harris looked genuinely shocked. In all my years here, I never knew. Daniel smiled modestly. My grandfather never wanted this school to belong to one family. He wanted it to belong to every student. Maya slowly walked toward her father. Dad, you never told me. Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. Because I never wanted people to treat you differently. I wanted every award, every grade, every achievement to belong only to you. Tears filled Maya's eyes. You let everyone think you were just another parent. Daniel smiled. I came here today for one reason. To watch my daughter graduate. Chairman Ellis turned toward Mrs. Carter. His voice remained calm. Mrs. Carter, you said earlier that today's ceremony should represent the school's legacy. She couldn't even lift her head. Ellis looked toward Maya, then quietly said, "There's no student in this auditorium who represents Samuel Johnson's dream more than Maya." The audience slowly rose to its feet. One person, then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. Maya stood in the middle of the stage, fighting back tears, while Mrs. Carter remained frozen beside the podium, realizing she had spent months humiliating the granddaughter of the very man who built the school she claimed to protect. The standing ovation continued. For nearly a full minute, no one sat down. Students, parents, teachers, even the school board remained on their feet. Maya looked around the auditorium, overwhelmed. Just minutes earlier, she had been sitting alone in the fourth row. Now, every eye in the room was filled with respect, not because of her father, because the truth had finally been seen. Chairman Ellis gently raised his hand. The applause slowly faded. He turned toward Principal Harris. "I believe there's one item left on today's program." Principal Harris smiled. "There certainly is." He picked up the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, our valedictorian." He looked directly at Maya. "Miss Maya Johnson, the stage is yours." The audience erupted into applause once again. Mrs. Carter slowly stepped away from the podium. Her hands trembled. As Maya walked toward the microphone, Mrs. Carter quietly whispered, "Maya." Maya stopped. Mrs. Carter's voice had completely changed. I'm sorry." Maya looked at her for a moment. She could see the regret, the embarrassment, the realization, but she simply nodded politely, then continued toward the podium. Daniel returned to his seat, not the front row, not the VIP section, the same seat in the last row where he had been sitting all along. Chairman Ellis smiled when he noticed. "You could sit anywhere," Daniel smiled back. "I already am." Maya unfolded the speech she thought she'd never get to give. She looked across the sea of faces. Her hands still trembled. Then she smiled. "When I first wrote this speech, I thought today would be about success." She paused. "But today taught me something much more important." The auditorium became completely silent. "I learned that respect should never depend on someone's last name, their job, their clothes, or the seat they're given." Several parents quietly nodded. Maya continued. "My father spent his entire life making sure no one knew who he was, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted me to earn every opportunity on my own." She looked toward Daniel. He smiled proudly. "I thought graduation would be the day I thanked him for believing in me." She laughed softly. "Instead, he reminded me what true leadership looks like." She slowly looked toward Mrs. Carter. The audience expected anger. They expected revenge. Instead, Maya smiled gently. "My grandfather built this school so every student could be seen. My father protected that dream. And today, I choose to continue it." She paused. "Because the greatest lesson any school can teach isn't mathematics, or science, or history. It's learning to see the value in someone before you know their story." Complete silence. Then, one student began clapping. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire auditorium exploded into the loudest applause of the day. Some parents wiped away tears. Students hugged each other. Even teachers who had worked beside Mrs. Carter for years stood applauding. After the ceremony, students gathered outside the school for photographs. Families celebrated. Flowers filled the courtyard. Mrs. Carter quietly walked toward Daniel. "I owe you an apology." Daniel looked at her calmly. "No, you owe one to Maya." Mrs. Carter nodded. "I know." She found Maya speaking with classmates. "Maya, I'm deeply sorry. I judged you before I truly knew you." Maya smiled kindly. "I hope the next student who walks into your classroom never has to earn your respect." Mrs. Carter lowered her head. "I promise." As the afternoon sun lit up the old stone entrance, Chairman Ellis unveiled a newly restored bronze plaque beneath the founder's portrait. It read, "Riverside Academy was founded on one simple belief. Every child deserves the chance to be seen, respected, and believed in." Daniel stood quietly beside Maya. She slipped her arm through his. "I finally understand why you never told anyone." Daniel smiled. "If people had known who I was, they would have respected my name." He looked at his daughter with pride. "I wanted them to respect yours." Maya hugged him tightly. "They always will now." Daniel shook his head. "No." He looked toward the hundreds of graduating students laughing together. "They'll remember you because of your character, not because of mine." The camera flashed one final time as father and daughter stood beneath the school their family had founded decades earlier. Not as owners, not as a powerful family, but as two people who proved that true legacy isn't measured by the name on a building. It's measured by the lives you inspire inside it. The end.